Hello, hello. I'm excited to be here today. Today I have Dr. Jessie Glaze with me. Dr. Jessie is a regular keynote speaker at wellness and networking events, speaking on the nervous system regulation and burnout prevention. Oh, I can't wait to dig into that. She developed Imposter to Executive, a comprehensive program for permanently banishing imposter syndrome without faking it until you make it in 90 days. Dr. Jessie's education includes a doctorate in physical therapy and an MA in psychology. She runs a virtual embodiment coaching business where she helps people all over the world. Her favorite somatic practices are yoga, lifting weights, and martial arts. She lives in Barcelona with her husband and two dogs. Jessie, welcome. I'm excited to have this conversation with you today.
Me too. Thanks so much for having me.
So, why don't you just share a little, that's a lot, right? So, why don't
Yeah.
you share your story a little bit of how you got from, where you were as a physical therapist and where you are today?
I'll keep an eye on the clock so I don't extend this because it's been a winding road that only makes sense if you know the life of ADD. So I got my bachelor's and master's in psychology, and I focused on trauma psychology. And so my research was on trauma and resilience, and I worked in the psychology field for a few years, and I kind of wasn't seeing a lot of the things that I really had learned that had given me hope for the future implemented. A lot of the strategies that I teach, I first learned about these in 2010, 2011, 2012, and some of them are just starting to break into public consciousness. And it is, things are slow, but I started kind of making some shifts toward more of the physical and spiritual. So I decided I had been planning to be a psychiatrist and basically decided not to. Had a whole, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? And in classic, what am I doing with my life mode, became a yoga teacher. And I taught yoga for a couple of years, right? It's a standard, right? It's a
Of
beautiful
course.
way of I've been doing yoga since I was 16. It's one of the only things making me feel good now that I have no idea what I'm doing. Why don't I learn how to share that? And so I did. And in that process, I started learning more about the body and how the body moves and how the body can heal itself. And that led me to physical therapy. And so I completed physical therapy, stayed strictly in the physical therapy world for about 2 years. And especially with that kind of coincided with the worst part of COVID.
Beautiful.
Um,
Perfect.
and so I was suddenly working with all of these people who had trauma that was affecting our work together. And I started using these tools that I learned with my patients, where they were coming in for like chronic I mostly worked in outpatient. There was a brief period during COVID where everybody kind of worked in the hospital or you didn't work. Um, but afterward, I was dealing with people who were post-COVID. I treat a lot of people with concussions. Um, and I started treating a lot of pelvic floor, and all of those people were dealing with trauma compounding their symptoms. So I started using all of these techniques, and then I finally decided to just run a workshop describing some of what I was doing. And it just immediately clicked. It escalated. I ended up running a bunch of workshops. I got a few one-on-one clients, and that was how I kind of built into the coaching space. And so I started as a trauma coach, and I still work as a trauma coach for about 50% of the people I see. The other half came because I started getting all of these high-powered women coming to see me to work on their trauma in order to help the way that they were showing up at work because they were experiencing all this workplace trauma. They were not standing up for themselves. They were feeling really inadequate. They were shrinking themselves down. And as a side effect of the trauma work we were doing, they started showing up differently in their workplaces. And so I did a bunch of market research and worked with some people and started to develop this program that I have now that I've kind of rebranded as the aligned executive, because some of the people that I work with don't view it as imposter syndrome or don't see it that way, but it's more so something isn't right. Something is not lined up. And that came directly from my trauma coaching, my nervous system work, and my work with people, especially women who were shrinking themselves at work, and what helped them start to show up more fully and get really great results from doing so.
I love that. I love that. And how does the embodiment piece, the physical, like, how do you incorporate that? You want to just tell the listeners a little bit how the physical piece helps heal the mental and spiritual piece.
Totally. So most trauma symptoms are physical. Like when you think about post-traumatic stress disorder, you're thinking about there are nightmares, that's a big one. But a lot of it is also losing time or losing location, having a moment where you feel like you're back at that space. And that's not necessarily even like I literally think that I am back in this situation or in this dangerous position. It's I'm getting the same sensations in my body. I'm
Mm,
having the same emotions as I had in that situation. I am reacting to something brand new, like it's an old, dangerous situation. And so when I talk to people about what does that feel like, sweaty palms, racing heart, racing thoughts tends to come too, but sometimes it's headaches, sometimes it's sensory overload. Almost all of those, nausea is a really common one, or twisting guts, sinking in the chest. Like it's all very, very physical. And honestly, what makes those symptoms so uncomfortable is the physical part.
mm.
If it were just having bad thoughts, it would be one thing, but it's having bad thoughts and feeling like you're so heavy you can't move, or having quick thoughts and feeling like my chest might explode. I might actually just die right now. I might have a heart attack. Like that's a very physical experience that a lot of my clients have brought to me. I also with women get, and more so with women, I think men get this too. I don't want to generalize, but chronic laryngitis,
Mm,
chronic throat issues. There is a certain vocal tone that happens where like voices will get higher if you are chronically stressed, and it's because of all the tightening through the vocal cords. And it changes. People's voices change
yeah.
when they've been working with me for a while. So all of that stuff, getting in touch with what's going on physically helps heal what's going on mentally and spiritually.
And do you work somatically with your clients? You,
um yes, I was like, I feel like we should make sure we're on the same page when we say that. Like what does that
okay.
mean to you?
So somatic to me is actually movement in the body to move the
Yes.
energy out. Okay.
Totally. Yep. Absolutely. We do a lot of movement. We do a lot of vocalizations. We do a lot of not just sensing where it is, but what does it look like? What does it feel like? Can you be it? Can you
Yeah.
move it? And I also have a few go-tos where I have all this anger and I don't know what to do, and we'll sometimes work on it. But anger is usually going to show up in chest motions, something that activates like pecs or lats are big. So I'll have people chop wood. I'll have people like whip something. I'll have people throw things, hitting with a racket. I'm a big fan of slam balls if you have access to them, like
Yeah.
taking something and just throwing it at the ground or throwing it at the wall and bouncing it. So that's like a specific one, but I do a lot of somatic work with people. Yeah,
And is all of your work virtual?
it is now. Yeah.
Okay.
I initially was doing a little mix of both. But for convenience for a lot of people, um, working virtually has been the most effective.
And you talk about trauma, and there's big trauma and, big T trauma and little T trauma. Do you work with both, or are you working mostly with big T trauma? Like, which do you find? Because I sometimes I think little T trauma is just as traumatic because in my work, I do some trauma work as well. I'm an EFT practitioner, so I use that as well. And sometimes the little stuff is, that person said something to you when you were 8 years old and you've carried it through your whole life, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did not want to interrupt you, but I'm like nodding as hard as I can. Like,
Yes,
yes, it is at least as big. And I don't want to diminish the big T traumas, but
right.
here's the deal: is those little T traumas are usually formative memories they instill deep core beliefs and you negate them, and the royal you, not like you personally, but like
Right, right.
people will downplay them and repeatedly beat themselves up for feeling as bad as they do about them. And it makes it worse because they put this layer of shame on it. Well, I didn't go through this.
Right. Well,
And I
and
hear it all
also,
the time.
go ahead, finish your thoughts. I'm like,
I was
yeah, I'm
just like,
like,
well,
yes, let's talk
yeah, I
about this.
know. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
like, we're right on the same page, right? It's like, well, and honestly, I hear it from the big T trauma people too, where they're like, okay, it's a joke about like, oh, but I never, among veterans, it's a veteran joke. So it's a little bit dark. So trigger warning, but it's, like, well, I didn't have to kill five people with an e-tool, which is basically a shovel, right? That's like the worst imagined thing.
Right.
And it's like anything less than that, you're basically just whining.
Right. And I think when you can't pinpoint, right? Like I think with the big T, I had abuse.
Hmm.
I was sexually assaulted. I was whatever, right? Like there's, what it is. And with the little stuff, it's just like, well, that just happened. And
Hmm.
sometimes I try to explain to clients where, okay, but that has carried, I had one client that when she was, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, she got made fun of because she wasn't wearing the cool pants, right?
Hmm.
And she's been looking, so she was made wrong
Yeah.
and she was in her 50s. And I said to her, so for 50 years, 40 years, you've been trying to figure out what's wrong with you. You actually haven't found anything wrong. Is it even remotely possible that nothing's wrong with you? And she just looked at me like, now what do I do with that information? Right. Like,
Right.
because, at 8 or 10 or whatever age she was told, she wasn't cool. She wasn't right. She was all the things. And we hold on to that and can't actually connect that to our behaviors today.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's so important to remember too that like when you're a little kid, especially, the idea of not being accepted by your group hits that deep evolutionary memory of when that was life or death. Because still today, you can't really survive without community, right? But some community is kind of built in where it's like, okay, like there's a company that will take care of you getting clean water, as opposed to like, we're all going to go together to the place where you get clean water and we need to. But if you didn't have that, if you were left by your community, your group, even 1,000 years ago, you were dead. So that feels like a life or death
Right.
situation, even though it's, haha, your pants look funny. Like,
Right. Well,
because
I
now you're
realize
on the outs.
I call myself a control freak in recovery.
Mm,
And when I was doing some inner child work many years ago, the first one was my little cute little 3-year-old, and we played on the beach and it was so much fun. And then the next time I did it, it was my 15-year-old, and she was like, back the fuck up. And I was like, oh, okay. Now, my parents got divorced when I was 15, and as an adult, I would tell you it was an amazing divorce. So grateful. My mom and her fiance, my dad and his girlfriend, we would have holidays together, right? Like it was great. But in the same weekend that they told us they were getting divorced, my grandmother tried to commit suicide. She didn't survive. I mean, she didn't survive the suicide. She was fine. Wait a minute. She did
yeah.
survive. She was
Yeah.
not successful in her attempt, but she lived with us. And I found out years later, my sisters didn't even know that that happened. I was like, how did you know that did? And I'm the oldest. How did you know that didn't
Yeah.
happen? But what I realized was at 15, nobody checked in on me, right? Like in
Mm,
one weekend, I had this traumatic thing, and then my parents split up. And at that point, I was never going to be unprepared again.
right.
That's where the control freak kicked in. I had to protect, I had to make sure that I was prepared for anything that
Right.
was, my husband and I went for a walk yesterday and a dog barked and I jumped. And he said, for somebody who's super hyper vigilant, he's like, I go, but because I've tried to let that go, I go, so things outside of the norm still freak me
Yeah.
out because I'm not on this constant hypervigilance. But like when I realized how much that one incident affected the trajectory of my life, I was like, damn, that's a lot.
It is. And it does. It like definitely catches up to you where you don't, it's usually one little thing, but it's you learn a lesson and then we are made to seek out confirmation of what we already know. So there are going to be all sorts of little things down the line where you're like, see, it's still true, see, it's still true, see, it's still
Right.
true. And you'll kind of ignore the evidence to the contrary until you go in and do that work.
Right. Oh, I had evidence for everything, right? And then,
Yeah.
then I've taken the last 15 years of doing my own work of really breaking that down, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm like, no, see, it's true, right? If I don't
Yeah.
do it, it doesn't get done. I have to make sure everything's perfect, blah, 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 whatever it was. Until
Yeah.
I have to go, all right, let's just breathe and just feel that uncomfortableness, right? So
Right.
often we don't want to feel, right? The control was so that I didn't have to feel uncomfortable, right? I had to make sure everything was. Now I'm like, okay, this feels really uncomfortable. I just have to, I need evidence that I'll survive this discomfort.
Right. And that that
Right.
you can be uncomfortable. And that's another reason I like to go back to the body is because when you get there, like your brain will have all kinds of ideas about what's going on here. And when you get there, you're like, my chest feels really tight. Okay, can you send some breath there? Or can we move there? And noticing that, like, your chest feeling tight, or your shoulders up in your ears, or that kind of like nausea is very uncomfortable, but it isn't actually dangerous.
Right.
And learning how to be with that helps your brain kind of start to rewire your response to that stuff. Where it's like, huh, okay, that makes me feel nauseous. I must not enjoy this. Or
Mhm.
this must be some kind of a no from my body instead of, oh God, here we go, you know?
I work with a lot of women that are very cerebral,
Hmm.
and teaching them like what a feeling or an emotion is, right? Like really
Yeah.
getting them more into their body and feeling it. And often it's they check out. Like I now know when I'm checking out, and I work with
Hmm.
enough healers, coaches and therapists that they call me on it now, where years ago I would just yes a therapist to death or a coach, and I'd be like I would, but I wasn't even in my body. And I'm
Right.
curious, what are some tips and tricks that you give to your clients to help keep them in their body because it's so easy to check out?
A really good one. I use a lot of um, returning, I guess is what I
Mhm.
would call it, where it's like noticing and being like, okay, where are you right now? Like, okay, can you notice your feet on the floor? And I love bringing people back to their feet
Yeah,
because
same.
it's very, feet are super sensitive. Um, and so you start to kind of, you like right away, they just drop. And it's anything that can get you to drop out of here. Like, okay, wait, can help with that. So that's a big thing that I do. I do eventually, once people are more comfortable in their bodies. I get people to do forms of like somatic approach of meditation where you're bringing your awareness not potentially to your breath, but also like to a body part or to one area. Or so I'll do that. I'll do body scans with people. And the other thing is that if it's okay, I'm out, I'm out, I'm out, we start to kind of go with what are the things that are pulling you out? What
Mm,
about this feels icky? Um, and one of the big like starting points is where can we resource? Where can we find that kind of warm, cozy, gooey feeling that makes your body feel like a nice place to be? And so I often set up in one of our first sessions some kind of physical anchor, whether it's I love the feeling of, here's a specific one was laying on the floor with my dog when the sun is coming through the window. Okay, and so that was an area that we would return to when I could tell, like, okay, wait, we're getting somewhere where you're
right.
spiraling, you're in your head. Okay, let's close our eyes. Let's go back. Can you feel like the floor against your back? Can you feel the warmth on your face? Like, what side is your dog on, right? And like actually getting into a visualization of what it's like to be very physically present and bringing in a lot of body awareness. And then going to, okay, what are you feeling in your body right now? Where are your feet now? What's against your back? How is it warm? Is it cold? And going through that to bring you back, starting with, oh, this is a feeling I love. And then, okay, this is a feeling that's happening.
I love that. I teach muscle testing and using
Oh,
your
nice.
body as a pendulum, right?
Hmm.
Because your brain will lie to you 100% of the time, but your
Hmm.
body has truth. Right.
Yeah,
Even when
definitely.
clients are considering working with me, I'm like, don't let your brain make this decision. Let me teach you this technique and let your body make the decision. Because your body and your soul knows what you need. Your brain is
Right.
always going to be like, nope, nope, because we're going to do some deep work. And your brain is like, danger, danger, no, no, no. Right.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah, that's a load
teaching.
bearing trauma. Don't do that.
Right, exactly. Nope, we're good. We're fine. And it is fascinating to me, and I've been this woman and can still sometimes be it, right? Like the not wanting to feel, right? I used to
Mhm.
weigh 300 pounds. I would often say I was never hungry a day in my life, right? I work with a lot of women who I call it their addiction to busyness, right? Which I think
Yeah.
is the worst kind of addiction because you get accolades for it, right? If you overeat, you're fat.
Yes.
If you drink too much, you're a drunk. If you do drugs, you're an addict. But if you're busy, you get a pat on the back and an atta girl, right?
Yeah,
So,
right. You're productive, but
right.
like, no, you're not. You're just
Right.
busy.
Right. I look at all my old Facebook memories and it's like, I was so productive today. I got so much done. I'm like, oh my God, I wore it as a badge of honor. Now, when I'm
Hmm.
too busy, I actually feel anxious because I need
Right.
space, right? Where before I could have been like, yeah, I got this. I'll work till midnight. It's no big deal. Now I'm like, I need to stop, right?
Yeah.
But this addiction to busyness that keeps us in the cycle of not feeling is real.
Yeah. And that's been a huge one for me as far as like, you're talking about being recovering in like control issues. Recovering from busyness is a big one, and recognizing that what I do when I'm busy all the time is pretty equivalent to running on a hamster wheel or a treadmill. I
Yeah.
am putting in a lot of work, but I'm not really going anywhere. And it is almost like the muscle testing, that pendulum approach of when I actually take the time to pause, I know exactly where to go and how to get there. Like my body knows.
Right.
And I will come up with all of these things that these little tasks or whatever that I should be doing in order to avoid doing what the flesh already knows.
Yeah. I know you live in Barcelona now and you haven't been there that long, but I'm just curious if you've noticed that how being in a different culture, if there's difference in how people show up with their nervous system, and just in general, because it's a different culture, it's a different lifestyle than here in the US.
The big thing that I notice is that people are slower. They
Mm,
move more slowly. They take more time over things. Meals are long. People take siesta. Um, that said, I am also, Barcelona is truly, in a lot of ways, a city of immigrants. As you get to an outskirts, there's more and more like true Catalonia, which is like the region of Spain. But part of that means that it's not just, okay, what is the culture of Barcelona or what is the culture of Spain, which is slower, but it's also, there are a ton of people from various areas of Central and South America, which is a different culture. And they are slower in some things, faster in others. I will say I have found, having lived in South America, I noticed that um, at least where I was, and in a few places in Central America too, that people are more embodied um, than any of the cities in the US that I've lived in.
yeah.
And I think that that's probably also true in Barcelona, even just in terms of like meal times are slow. You take time to rest in the middle of the day. You take time to get together. Most things aren't a rush. And that's just kind of a big lifestyle change from the US in general, where it's like, it's got to get done now. And they're just like, okay, you know.
Right. How have you adapted to that? Because are you still on US time and urgency, or have you started to adapt to, I'm going to take a siesta?
Oh, definitely. I've started to adapt and I like love that. Actually, that was something that I was prepared for. I was like, oh, this is going to be so good for me because it is
Yeah.
like forced downtime. Um, there are also moments, right, where I think I told you as we were getting on, I'm dealing with some bureaucracy right now. And I was like, okay, I need to figure this out. I need this to get this to get this. And there's also, I go into everything knowing this is what I want to get done today. Let's find out if it happens. And I found that if I embrace it with a little bit of like curiosity, like interesting, okay, there's a new step. All right, didn't know about that.
Right.
That really, really helps with, okay, wait, like what I wanted to get done today probably isn't getting done today, but
And
maybe a
nobody's
small
going to
piece of it
die.
will. Right. Or if that small piece doesn't get done, I'll have learned how to do part of this process that I didn't know was there before. So it's
Mm,
not that I'm not going anywhere. It's just that it's step by step.
yeah. I love that. So I want to talk a little bit about, you talked about, you don't call it real, you're not really saying imposter syndrome anymore, but more about alignment. But
Hmm.
let's talk a little bit about imposter syndrome and how that affects,
Yeah.
what are some of the misconceptions people have about it, and how does it affect our confidence? And where do you think it, let's start from the fundamental, like where do you think it even comes from?
I think that the biggest thing that I see, and this is granted the people that I work with, is something about me is different from what is anticipated in this role. And
Mm,
therefore, I never feel good enough for it. And so, where that usually shows up is I work with a lot of women, I'll work with people of color, I'll work with people who are neurodivergent, I'll work with people whose English is a second language. And that's also part of why I moved away from imposter syndrome, because I didn't want people to feel like they're an imposter, but there are these subtle things that people will do, even if they're like, no, no, really, it's fine. And a lot of it is micromanaging, over promising, getting that 50th credential and still not actually feeling like you deserve to be at your job. Every time you talk to your boss, you're like, this is the time he fires me. Like a lot of those behaviors, maybe this is silly, but instead of like, hey, I see an opportunity, right? Like these little language things that people will do. And I think that it comes from, again, it could be the weird pants, but in some way being othered
mm,
or feeling like you don't belong, then you're like, well, if I get enough XYZ, surely then I will belong. And not realizing it's more of an internal problem than an external one.
yeah, and you said something at the beginning, and I'm going to paraphrase it,
Mhm.
was that they're not fulfilling what they expect the job should be, or something like that. And I'm just curious, like whose expectations, right? Like, are they being
Yeah.
told, "Hey, you're not what we expected," or are they internalizing, "Oh, I'm not what they expected"? And those are two very different things.
And it's probably both.
Yeah.
And so it's not just people saying, like, you're not what we expected. Sometimes it's people saying, oh, when they meet you.
Right.
And I've gotten that a lot because I have a kind of a gender neutral name.
Yeah.
Jessie is my full name. Um, I don't, my parents didn't like the name Jessica. There's not like a special reason for it beyond that. Like
Right.
that was the name they
Yep.
picked. And I've had that moment of like, oh, especially at a sports clinic where they're like, I'm not who they expected.
Interesting.
And I've talked to a lot of people where they're like, oh, this isn't what, I'm not who somebody expected, or this isn't a role that I anticipated having. Like I've stepped into leadership, but it was like, oh, people just gave me opportunities. It wasn't really that like there's just these ways that we discount it because did I really earn this? And I think a lot of that does come from feeling like the other people who are doing what I'm doing look, act, market, etc. this way. And I'm not doing that. So am I doing it wrong?
Yeah, I love that. Um, what are some simple embodiment practices that maybe someone who's listening right now that is in their head a lot and is like, I don't even understand what these people are talking about?
Yeah,
What is something that they can try right now to feel a little bit more grounded and powerful?
absolutely. I love focusing on the feet, like standing with your feet forward and parallel. Okay, it actually does make you stand better. It's a martial arts thing. And feeling the weight of your feet on the floor, and then play with your center of gravity. So notice if you put more weight in the right foot or in the left foot. Maybe you go forward till you're kind of on the balls of your feet or backward till you're in the heels. And if you're not able to stand, you can also do the sitting, right? Same thing, right hip, left hip, forward, backward. But that's one that you can do anywhere. And it is a quick way where, because you're playing with how gravity feels against your body, it brings you into your body really quickly.
Mm.
Um, Another one I really like is, especially, I've noticed a lot of the people I have that are very cerebral, pause and notice, are you seeing yourself through your eyes, or are you imagining yourself in your mind's eye? Because a lot of people I work with are actually almost viewing themselves from outside. They're focusing on, oh, what do I look like to an observer?
Mm.
And so I'll have them actually, okay, find where you are. Like, where are you looking at yourself from? Like, maybe it's, oh, I'm off to the left. I'm looking at my profile. Okay. Can you bring yourself around to the back so that you're looking at the back of your head? And then can you start to gently move in and merge to be looking directly out of your own eyes?
Very
And
cool.
I found that to be a really quick, like, whoa,
Yeah.
way to get in.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Um, what does true empowerment look like to you? And how do you help your clients really step into that?
For me, empowerment is, I have power by virtue of existing and I don't need to take it from you.
Mm.
I have belief and deep trust in my vision, and I am willing to share it with other people and take the steps to accomplish it. And I don't need to force or wrangle anyone, right? Like, it's being, allowing yourself to attract rather than needing to like grab at people. And a lot of the time, stepping into it is, I said it at the beginning, deep self trust.
Yeah.
When you trust yourself, it's not scary to talk about the things that you love, even to an audience of strangers or the wide internet. It's not scary to speak up in a meeting about what you believe in. Because if you trust yourself and you trust your gut, you're like, oh, this is an important thing. My gut says so.
Right. I love that. I love that. I've been in physical therapy a lot over the last year and a half because I've had both my hip and my knee replaced.
Ah, that'll
And
do it.
yeah, 5 months post knee replacement. And it's been a rough battle. And part of it is because I've been in pain for so many years, I accommodated my
Yeah.
body. So I have no strength. Like we're doing a lot of strength training, strength building now. And I think of my body like when I lost all my weight 30 years ago, I was in the best shape, right? Like people would comment on my muscles and now I'm like my lower body's in atrophy. And
Hmm.
it was fascinating when I was talking to my physical therapist yesterday about how much my body accommodated where it was at. So it's still doing that now, even though the knee is working. So she's like, you can bend it more. I'm like, but I can't. My brain is saying, but I can't.
Hmm.
And I'm just curious, right? You must run into that, right? Where people are like, nope,
Hmm.
this is it. This is where I'm at. Because now that's where I'm that's the work I'm doing on internally. I'm like, this is fascinating, right? Because I do mindset
Yeah.
work and my mind is like, nope, this is as far as it goes. And she's like, it can go more. She's like, but you're telling yourself you can't. And I was like,
Right.
because it hurts and I don't want to.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, but when our brain gets that strong in the way, how do you help your clients really see it from a different perspective and really try something that I'm using mine as physical uncomfortable, but a lot of what you're doing is more probably emotionally uncomfortable.
It's a little bit of both. And sometimes the way that I do this, I feel like this is one of the weirdest things that I'll do, which I feel like is right up your alley, so it's perfect, is,
I like weird.
oh,
Yep.
okay, let's talk to that pain. That
Mm,
pain is saying no. Okay, what do we have to, and we'll actually say, like, what does that pain feel like when you try to bend it? Like if you had to act it out, what would that pain be? You know, and it's like, oh, it's like a wrenching knot, or oh, it's like this vibration, or oh, it's like stabby, right? And like, let's see it. And if we work with this energy a little bit, make it bigger, amplify it, bring it into your awareness, what is this energy doing? What does it want? And when you actually talk to it, it will talk back.
Mm,
I cannot tell you the number of times that I have had people now where they're like, oh, it's this energy. And I'm like, okay, I want to talk to this energy. What are you doing? And the person will answer with words that I can see in their eyes. They're like, I didn't know that was it.
yeah,
Right? Because it's a way of doing shadow work. It's an
right,
unconscious and making it conscious. There's something unconscious in your brain because the part of your brain that controls how far things will stretch isn't conscious.
right.
It's just not. It happens like back here. So getting that, oh, what are we scared of? What's going on? Like, is it a fear? Is it a protective? Is it a, it might be, oh, it can bend further, but this muscle is not, whatever. And so actually engaging with the stop. Okay, you're stopping me. Let's talk to you. What's going on?
Mm,
Why do we need to stop? And when you do, you can start to actually have a conversation and it will start to even listen to logic. So I had somebody who was convinced that, like, okay, if I step out of my comfort zone, this part of the unconscious part was, if I step out of my comfort zone, we're going to die. I was like, okay, what? And this was somebody who was pretty spiritual. I knew she wasn't really scared of dying. So I was like, what happens if we die? I was like, I don't know. And then it just let go. It was like
yeah,
just engaging with it gave it that, oh, well, if you're paying attention, I don't need to yell so loud.
I love that. I love that. I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna talk to the pain. And I'm gonna,
Yeah,
like as you're talking, I was like, you're an EFT practitioner. Tap on it. Right? Like sometimes we
right.
forget the tools that we have. I was like, you were talking and I was
Absolutely.
like, oh my God, go do some tapping on it. Yeah. Um, what's something that you wish more people understood about their own power and potential?
Oh my gosh, that you already have it.
Mm,
And all you're getting out of like coaching or therapy is guidance toward your own tools. Like we can offer different like tools, but there are things that your body knows that your body is able to do. And they may not be things that you're going to figure out on your own. Like a lot of the stuff that I do, it's like I would not have come up with this intuitively, right? I studied a lot, I learned a lot. And I still, when I talk to people about their brains or bodies and I explain how it works, there's that moment of, oh, like that makes sense. Like it explains all the confusing stuff, but like you wouldn't have guessed that.
right.
And these are all tools that, like, no matter where you're at, you can use them to get in touch with that power. Like you have that power. It's just a matter of gently removing whatever it is that you're using to dampen it.
I love that. I love that. So let's talk about how people can work with you. You work
Mhm.
one-on-one, do you do groups? What's the best way that people can work with you?
I work with people one on one because I teach you how to converse with your body, and that starts with me conversing with your body. And it
Yeah.
just isn't as, I don't think it's as effective in a group setting. I've done a couple of groups over the years and I haven't been super, other people, people say good things, but I'm like, I've seen it work one on one. I've seen it in a group. This is different and I like
Yeah.
it more. It's so I work with people one on one. And you can find me. My website is reclaimyourlifesomatics.com. And that's where I do all
And
of
we'll
my kind
put
of
all
like
that
trauma.
in that'll be
Yeah,
in the
all
show
my
notes.
trauma and leadership coaching is there. And that's how you can get in touch with me as well.
Okay.
Um,
And you also, we're going to put your link to your offer in the show notes as well, which is 10 somatic skills to regulate your nervous system. You want to just talk a little bit about what that is?
yeah, it's like the worst named link ever, but it is what it is. Like I was like, I don't know how else to describe it. So these are, it's 10 specific practices. You said, what are some quick practices? So it has 10 of them, and some of them are video and some of them are written, but 10 ways to get into your body quickly or to adjust what you're feeling in your body quickly. So some of them are specifically, if you are panicking, do this.
Mm,
Some of them are, if you feel frozen, do this. And some of them are, if you feel like you're just kind of not with it, this will bring you back.
nice. I love that. I always love to ask this last question. What is something that you live by that you want to share with the listeners?
If it's not a hell yes, it's a no.
Mm,
That's been a new one for me. I like to accommodate. Historically, I like to accommodate and make things work, and we'll see what we can do. And I'm just like, for me and for my clients, so like if you're not sure that I'm a fit for you, like don't worry about it. Like,
right. I often
let's
say if I
wait
have
on
to
this.
beg you to work with me, it's not going to be fun for me.
Yeah, right? Like, absolutely not. No, I'm a very specific flavor, and like,
Yeah,
it's okay if I'm not your flavor. And I've
right,
talked about that before too, where it's like, if you are like, I need what you do, but you are definitely not my person, like, cool, I might know some people, like, let's
right,
talk.
right.
Um, but also, like, for me in my life and my business, like, I spent time going down tracks that I was like, well, this seems like a good idea to who? Like, if I'm not excited about it and lit up about it, I'm probably not going to put my all into it, and it's not going to be what I want it to be.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, Jesse, this has been such a good conversation, and I could talk to you forever. I do pull cards at the beginning, and I've pulled
Yes.
three cards, so I'm going to have you choose. So we have one that is left, center, and right. And today we're pulling from the Magic of Unicorn deck.
Oh, lovely. All right. Let's go with right.
Okay, right. Yes. Oh, I like, often, and I don't look at these beforehand, and so often
Hmm.
they have to do with the conversation that we're having. Stand in your power, be passionate about
Yup.
your vision, bring about positive change.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
this is center. Access your gifts, explore your treasure chest, accept who you truly are.
Beautiful.
And this is left. Magical crystal cave. Switch on your inner light. Bring forward your gifts.
Nice.
Aren't these beautiful? So I learned something this week. I love unicorns. That's my spirit animal. I'm a little unicorn.
Hmm.
And I had a birthday last month, and somebody gave me a stuffed animal, and on it says Pegasus. And my husband said to me the other day, he said something about your unicorn. I said, no, this is a Pegasus. He said, no, Pegasus don't have horns. And I was like, yes, they do. They have wings and horns. I said, the tag says Pegasus. He's like, they
Hmm.
don't. So we go down this spiral, and Pegasus don't have horns.
Nope.
They just have wings. But an alicorn has wings and horn. Now, have you ever heard of an alicorn?
I have not, and I didn't know. I assumed they just made the Pegasus wrong. I was
I've
like, no, the
always,
unicorns have the horns, the wings are on the Pegasus, but neither of the twain shall meet. I didn't know
and
about this
I
alicorn.
always
Okay.
thought that I've always been under the perception that they, a Pegasus is a winged unicorn. And my friend gave
Oh,
me this stuffed animal, and without even looking at the tag, I was like, oh, it's a Pegasus. And then I saw the
yes.
tag and it says Pegasus on it. So I
Hmm.
just didn't think. So we're like going back and forth, and I was like, he's Googling it, I'm Googling it. And I was like, what's an alicorn? So it is true. You do learn something new every day.
Love that.
Oh, Jesse, thank you so much for being here. This has been such a fun conversation. And for those of you listening, thank you for joining me on today's journey towards a more enlightened and fulfilling life. I really hope that today's episode has inspired you to embrace your inner wisdom and navigate your path with a renewed sense of purpose. Remember, transformation begins from within. Take a moment each day to connect with your higher self and trust that the universe is guiding you towards your highest good. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, do all the things, and share this podcast with anyone else who might be able to benefit from our message. Stay connected with our community. Both mine and Jesse's social media links, website, all the things will be in the show notes. And until next time, continue to shine your light and walk in peace and love. I am Francine Terrell, and this has been Effin' Fridays with Francine. Jesse, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you again for having me.